So, quick story before I get to your free play tonight on Washington and Boston, a series that I've been pretty much right on the money with so far. Many years ago, went to Temple University to get a degree in journalism, and it's really interesting when I look back to how I ended up where I am today, because I had never intended to get into the sports business, never intended to get into sports journalism, to become a sports reporter, which eventually led me into the gambling industry, which eventually led me to creating these websites you see today, to become the leader in this marketplace, really the founder of this online sports handicapping business some 15 years ago, and these sites that you now see today that so many others have ripped off what I created and had the foresight to do so 15 years ago. But at the time, many years ago, Temple University, I was a sophomore in college, and I had this investigative journalism, public affairs reporting class, and had an adjunct professor. An adjunct professor is somebody who is an active journalist at the time, who also happens to teach a class. And this guy worked for a now defunct newspaper called the Philadelphia Bulletin, and it was a 4-person class. That's right, only a 4-person class. So we had to agree that if we wanted to have the class, to sign a waiver. Otherwise, Temple was going to go ahead and disband the class. But this guy said that if we agreed to do it, that he would, because it was just a 4-person class, take us with him. Every week we had 3 2-hour classes. He would take us with him on all the stories he was working on. Well, who, as a sophomore in college, wanting to be a journalist, wouldn't just beg for that opportunity? It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So this guy took us to mob trials. This guy took us to arson investigations. This guy took us to police investigations. This guy took us everywhere you can possibly imagine. As he was working on stories, we never knew where class would be. He would tell us, we would show up, and we would go and follow the stories. And then when he wasn't working on stories, we'd walk into the class and he would assume a persona. We'd walk into the class and he'd say, on this particular day, I am so-and-so. I am at this scene. You're the reporters, and you are now an active reporter. This is an active investigation. You come in and you quiz me. And that's how we learn. And that's how we became journalists, because he helped us hone our craft. Toward the end of the semester, he said, I pretty much taught you everything that a journalist can experience, but there's one thing that I can't take you on. There's one thing that I would never take you on. So we walk into class today, and he said the toughest thing that any journalist in my field ever has to do is when you knock on the door, and it's when somebody has just lost somebody. A family member has been killed, a family member has passed away, and you've got to knock on the door and you've got to get the story. And he walked in and he said, now you're going to do that. And you're going to interview that person, somebody who's in a grieving situation. And it's definitely something different, something that I never had to do as a news reporter. Because within a year or so, I realized that news just wasn't for me. Just wasn't my cup of tea. I couldn't see myself doing that. Sports was something I always liked, and I could see myself doing sports because just like news, it changes every single day. And if you're going to do something that changes every day, you have to have a passion for it. And covering news just wasn't my thrill. Sports certainly was. But fast forward a couple of years later, I took that, what he told us, and and applied it to when you walk into a locker room. Let me tell you something. Covering a game, covering a team after they've won a game, easiest thing in the world. Everybody's happy after you win. You walk into a locker room after somebody's lost, it's like going to a funeral. It's like knocking on the door after somebody has suffered a loss. There's grieving going on. And I thought about that last night when the Houston Rockets lost to the San Antonio Spurs, because that's a game that they should have won. You know it as well as I did. You saw when Leonard went out, that was there. The Rockets had that game. Now, James Harden had nothing left at the end. He played too many minutes last night. His legs were gone. But Leonard goes out, and Danny Green just puts on his Superman cape, scores the final 7 points for the Spurs, and wills them to the victory. But the Rockets should have won that game. They will never have a better chance to take that series. Yes, I said take that series, because Game 5 is really just like Game 7, as we will see tonight with the Wizards and the Celtics. Because Game 5 on the road, sure, the Rockets probably come back and win Game number 6, but they still got to go back and win Game number 7. That series was there for them to win last night without Leonard down the stretch, with the way the Rockets played, and they gave it away. So I thought about it. You know, when you go into a locker room in that situation, everybody's on pins and needles. Not the coaches, not the players. It's the reporters, because you never know how exactly the players and the coaches are going to respond. You've got to be so delicate in the way you couch your questions, because let me tell you, I've seen it where you may think you're just asking the right question. You get the death stare. You get the FU response. You get the no response. You get the response where the guy just wants to really just reach out and punch you. And a lot of times those responses are well deserved. If you listen to some of the post-game comments and questions by some of the reporters last night, some of them, you have to wonder, did they ever cover a game in their life? Some of the dumb-ass, open-ended questions that were asked to some of the Rockets players and the coaching staff last night, you got to wonder, how did these guys ever get media credentials? But I've often said, you know, journalism is one of those fields that you go to school, you get a degree, it says, hey, I'm a journalist. Doesn't mean you can write. Doesn't mean anybody ever said you were qualified to ask any questions. But anyway, I thought about that last night after watching that game. So let's talk about this game tonight between the Celtics and Washington. You know, this is the most disjointed, unevenly matched 2-2 series that you'll ever see. Because Washington should have won the damn series by now. It should be over. The Wizards certainly dominated games 1 and 2. This should be a clean sweep. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. Didn't. That's the final word in that phrase. Shoulda, coulda, woulda, didn't. And that's the bottom line. Isaiah Thomas. You know, I said in backing the Wizards in game number 3, and it was a 15-time best bet for me in game number 3, that, or hold on, I'm sorry. That was game number 4. I think I took the Wizards. You know, I've had so many playoff picks, even I soon start forgetting. I thought that sooner or later, the Wizards were going to wake up and realize that if you're going to let Isaiah Thomas just sit around and play no defense, or at least not challenge him, that's just suicidal, that you've got to start running people at Isaiah. And Scott Brooks, like the light bulb went off after games 1 and 2. It's like, hey, you know, we got to start running guys at him. And suddenly you saw Otto Porter at 6'9", starting to back him down and post Isaiah Thomas at 5'9", posting him up. And you saw Boris Bogdanovic coming off the bench at 6'8", and they're starting to run screens and run plays right at Isaiah Thomas. And suddenly Isaiah Thomas is taken out of the offense because he's being forced to play some defense. And Isaiah Thomas, who launched 33 shots in game number 2 in that overtime magnificent effort where he scored 29 points there down the stretch, well, 33 shots in game number 2, he had a combined 22 shots in games number 3 and 4, and he was totally ineffective. Had turnover problems as well in game number 4 as well in the loss at Washington. And you saw the Wizards coming up with those 2 big back-to-back blowout wins. Now, the Wizards had those 2 great first quarters in games 1 and 2 at Boston, but the Celtics willed themselves to the wins. I take the deep, heavy sigh there, because which team are we going to get here tonight? Are we going to get the Wizards team that is playing with such confidence here tonight, the Wizards team that came out like hellfire in quarters number 1 in games 1 and 2, but then choked in games 1 and 2 in the second half? Or are we going to get the Wizards team that played 4 full quarters at home in games 3 and 4? Maybe we're going to get a little mixture of both. Again, the Wizards are 1 and 4 in the playoff road. The only win came in game 6 at Atlanta. This is a Wizards team that was 3 games under 500 on the road in the regular season. This is a Washington team that was much better at home than on the road. This is a Boston team that was much better at home than on the road. This is a series that has been home dominated. The home team is 8-0 straight up in the regular season. This is a playoff series in which the home team has covered every single game, have they not? The key here tonight is Isaiah Thomas has got to get open. Brad Stevens is not a dummy. He remember in the Chicago series when the Bulls had their way with Rondo in the series early. Now, when Rondo went out, of course, it changed the whole complexity of the series. But even before that, he started moving Al Horford to the high post and started letting him set screens and used his passing skills to open up things. But tonight, the key, I think, for the Celtics is twofold. One, Isaiah Thomas has got to get open. He's got to get more involved in the offense. And two, somebody has to give Isaiah Thomas some offensive support. Avery Bradley, Marcus Smart, and Jay Crowder have been totally ineffective offensively. Who is going to step up and give Isaiah Thomas some offensive help? The other thing for the Celtics tonight, somebody has to play a little defense here tonight. Somebody has to put the clamps on, not John Wall and Bradley Beal. No, those guys are going to get their 50 points. Somebody has to stop Otto Porter from getting 18, stop Markieff Morris from getting his 16, stop Marcin Gortat from getting his 15 or 16. Those three guys cannot combine for another 50 to 60 points, because otherwise, that's going to kill Boston. I'm willing to invest on the Celtics minus the 4.5 points in a home-dominated series tonight. I'm willing to go with the Celtics because, again, I just think that the Celtics coming back at home tonight have one last hurrah. And in a pivotal Game 5, I think Boston is the way to go, minus the 4.5 points against an Atlanta team that, other than Game 6 at Atlanta, has shown me nothing on the road in the postseason and has been a sub-500 team during the regular season at 19-22 straight up. Plus, Isaiah Thomas has just been money in the bank when they have needed him most this season. And also remember, after game number 4, what did Isaiah Thomas do? The same thing that every coach and every player wants to do when they want to put a little bug in the official's ear. Hey, the guys were playing me too physical. Hey, I wasn't getting the benefit of any calls. Hey, I didn't get one single free throw at the line and these guys were mugging me out there. It wasn't for the benefit of what happened in Game 4. That was setting the table for Game 5 tonight. In Boston, the refs are going to call a tighter game. The officials are going to definitely blow more whistles in the Celtics' favor tonight, and that's going to open up things more for Boston. So I think laying the 4.5 points are the way to go. So Boston is going to be my play tonight. I wish you well, guys, and talk again tomorrow when we do this one more time.